Welcome to the Spark Podcast, hosted by Dynamic Lifecycle Innovations, where cutting-edge solutions meet effortless experience and maximum returns. Today we are joined by James Bailey and Jeremy Olson. Now let's get started.
Welcome everybody to this session of the Spark Podcast, broadcasted by Dynamic Lifecycle Innovations. Today we're excited to have a couple people join us. First of all is James Bailey, IT Asset Manager from FedEx, with multiple years of experience within the field. We also have Jeremy Olson from Dynamic. He is a senior corporate solutions executive with almost 15 years of experience within the industry. So welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for making the trip.
Anytime.
What we're going to be doing today is really exploring the pillars that lead to a successful partnership from both the client's point of view, but also an ITAD vendor's point of view as well. So let's go ahead and get started. And first question, James, is going to be more from your point of view as the client. So when FedEx started seeking a new ITAD partner a few years back, what challenges or pain points were you looking to solve?
So for us, we've been in a long-term relationship with our prior vendor, and things had started to change relationship-wise. So for us, when we went out for RFP, we had about 6 months of IT assets that we'd been storing on site.
Okay.
We wanted to use that as a test for our new vendor, and that was really our main pain point. So trying to find a really great long-term partner to build and establish a great relationship with, as well as managing through that backlog.
And then, it seems like going through RFP process, probably you from the client point of view and also experiencing that from the vendor side, Jeremy, for you, transparency seems to be really important going through that process. So if you guys could each explain, maybe from each of your seats too, why that's so important, but also how it has helped really set the stage for better outcomes post RFP process.
Yeah, absolutely. I can go first. And I'll use the corporate buzzword lockstep. I think transparency up front in the RFP, and I think FedEx did a really great job of painting the best picture of what the ITAD vendors that were participating were going to be experiencing if they were selected. They published the pounds of recycled material by device type. They did all of their process expectations. They listed an implementation plan that was what their expectation was. So it really set the bar for transparency for the RFPs I participated in. To be completely honest, it gave Dynamic as an organization the internal awareness of, yes, we want to get aggressive on this. We want to, our end goal is to be the vendor, but we knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into when we were putting together our proposal, which I think is really helpful. And then, having the pleasure of being onboarded as a vendor and being selected, we were in lockstep from day one. Like, we knew what all parties were going to be doing. So it made it very, very efficient when it came to onboarding.
Fantastic.
I think lockstep is actually a perfect word, right? As we went out to RFP, I think originally we had about 75 vendors to actually respond.
Wow.
We narrowed that list to a top 10.
Okay.
And then at that point, we decided that we wanted to go to each site, right? So obviously, vendors reply to questions. It's one thing to read the responses. It's another thing to actually go on site and actually see those words in action. One of the big things that we walked away with from Dynamic was culture, right? The culture of your organization fit perfectly with the culture of FedEx. So that transparent piece became very obvious early on about what we can and can't do. And it gave room for negotiation and partnerships and relationships. So all of those things were critical for us as we were going through the first part of the process.
Yeah. And as you mentioned with going on site too, because I know we talk to organizations from time to time and we mentioned and we recommend that, that's such a valuable piece. So was that really insightful for you guys throughout it, just when you're comparing the different organizations together then?
So for us, it's probably a gross analogy, but I look in terms of if you're buying a home or if you're buying a car, right? You want to go through and you want to be thorough in terms of going through that process, right? You want to test drive the car.
Yeah.
You want to drive through the neyborhood different times of the day. Are there kids out? What's happening in the neighborhood, right? No different than building a corporate partnership, right? You want to understand what's the organization like? How are the people? How do they treat their people? All of those things are important, right? And I think for us, we call it pulling back the covers, right? When you pull back the covers, right? The words that were on the RFP met what we saw in person, right? So it wasn't an opportunity for there to be this ambiguity. It was very clear that everything that was written was being demonstrated in the office. So that was a big win and a huge comfort level for us, right? Having been with our previous partner for more than 10 years making a sudden shift, right? You definitely want a comfort level. And then I just taken that role probably 6 months prior to. So it's like, hey, new role, new vendor, you definitely want some comfort there. So seeing it was worth, it's almost like a picture's worth 1,000 words. It literally meant that to us to be able to do that.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you were able to take that opportunity to go visit all the vendor sites and that it was so helpful for you too. That's awesome.
I think that visit too, what I'll add, I mean, it just kind of set the playing field for the communication standpoint, which I think we're going to touch on in a little bit. But, the word that I heard James and the team use over and over again from the moment we submitted our RFP to the when they came on site was partnership. And you even mentioned it just now. And I think like when you talk about our culture, we talk about your culture. Right. It's like we knew that this was going to be a family dynamic just with where everybody's vision for the relationship was going. So I think that really helped us know where our commitment level needed to be at. And that's a level that we're used to being at as long as, it's reciprocal.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, guys. Well, and you kind of mentioned, obviously, hit on communication quite a bit there. So once you moved from that RFP stage and award and going into that onboarding process, which can vary, it can take a short amount of time if it's rushed and there's a need in place, absolutely. But it can also take a year sometimes, just really depending on the organization and the vendor. So for you guys, when you look at that onboarding process, what role does reoccurring communication play or those shared milestones and hitting your targets? How does communication play into those?
So for me, it really takes the guesswork out of the process, right? The thing that was really important for us during our migration was the fact that everyone was always seemed to be on the same page. So we knew that we had a huge backlog that we needed to work through. We knew we had some deadlines in terms of when we needed to be out of the other facility that we were leasing. So everything was up front. So it kind of set the stage again for the relationship, right? It also gave us an opportunity to test the systems, right? I think that was a big thing for us going into that new partnership, being able to say, hey, here's how we work. Here's how we work. Oh, by the way, let's figure out how do we work together, right? So having an opportunity to really exercise the process on the beginning, and then having the opportunity to constantly tweak, it almost forced the communication to some degree, and it made the partnership, I think, blossom that much quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, to James's analogy of, like, test drive the car, like, this was the first stage of understanding the horsepower of what Dynamic could do. We're talking 1,000 pallet backlog that's ready right now, and their preference is get it out in the next couple days. Our preference is like, we obviously have to manage other inbound material, but, setting that deadline and communicating around it, I think, you ask, what role it plays. I think communication, personal life, professional life, it plays the biggest role.
Absolutely.
And I think when we still have meetings, like we set up bi-weekly meetings to the start, we still have them today. And I think it's extremely helpful for either connecting the dots, making sure people are on the same page, interpreting different reporting, and or making fixes that we need to make, and to allow FedEx to maybe implement that reporting back into their software or, be able to read that internally the way they need to.
The other thing is I think it takes the guesswork out of the relationship, right? It's like a marriage, right? It's you know what the other person's thinking. So even when things are difficult, the conversations are easy, right? It's, hey, we're negotiating something, and he knows that he's fully negotiating for Dynamic, and I know I'm fully negotiating for FedEx, and we find the middle ground. It's so much easier to find that because of the relationship that we've established.
Yeah. And I would say even in negotiations, which we've had recently, it's like, where I'm coming from. I know where you're coming. Like we say it out loud, like, it's.
What's our favorite term? In the spirit of transparency. We probably say that to each other.
We do.
Half dozen times a week, right?
Yeah, so exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you for talking through that. And like you said, too, communication is so important in every aspect of life. But yeah, it makes those, if there are any challenging conversations, but just of like, hey, there's a stuck, right? There's a stuck in everybody's life at some point, whether it's somebody that you work with every single day or once a year, whatever it might be. And it just makes it so much easier to go through those stucks and work through those stucks and get to that successful part for everybody, kind of a thing, win-win situation.
And I think that's a great point. I think the vulnerability levels at this point are just so high. Like, there's no stakeholders in our weekly meetings that haven't met one another. And they're talking regularly. So everybody, again, is in lockstep with what's going on that side of the fence, on our side of the fence. And it just makes for an efficient relationship.
Yeah, wonderful. And I would say, too, so most likely along with that, communication being really strong, I'm sure adaptability too, as you guys mentioned, if things change. And James, as you mentioned, you had a vendor for 10 plus years. So change is sometimes like, oh, we're so used to our certain routines. And so the change. So how does really adaptability play into having a continued successful partnership and moving forward?
So for us, it's really critical, right? You really don't understand what another person's going through until you're having that conversation, right? So when you think about the fact that we're a small cog in the wheel from a customer perspective, and that you also have other customers to service, understanding how things ebb and flow in your business, what other needs you need to meet, right? Those things become critical.
Yeah. I think adaptability, I mean, I'll speak from the vendor perspective. I mean, we need to give them confidence that as their business changes, which FedEx is probably one of the largest ships of corporation sizes out there. As they change and things shift within their organization, they need to have the confidence that we're going to come alongside of them and be ready for anything. And again, I go back to that backlog, like that's proof right there, right out of the gate. But I mean, we've had a lot of different project needs. Right now we're talking about doing some data center work together, and I mean it. We talk about a plan day one, 5 days later, that plan might change, for various reasons, vendor or on their side. So, I think it's really important to be open to adapting. And the moment you start to put your clients in a box is the moment you basically choke off the ability to adapt. And, that's one thing that as a corporation, I think with Dynamic and being here for the time that I have, we've never wanted to put clients in a box. It's like, here's the box. You shape and form it the way you need to meet your needs, and we'll operate it within it. But we can bend corners and do. We can modify it how we need to meet your business needs as they change.
Yeah, fantastic.
I think for us, right, when Dynamic comes to mind, I think of water, right? Whatever you put water in, it takes the shape of that container.
Yeah.
Right, and when you think about the projects, the relationship, all the challenges that we've had and overcome throughout the course of establishing a relationship, that's the thing that comes to mind. So I think when I think adaptability, I think water, and I think of your culture, and again, how great of a partnership we formed together.
I appreciate that. That's a good analogy.
Wonderful. All right. Well, kind of thinking about what we talked about today is, hearing a lot about transparency, about communication, adaptability or flexibility, but it also sounds like continuous improvement too, of just being able to adapt and move forward in such a positive way. How do you guys feel like looking at some of those key pillars for keeping a strong relationship play into the ability to support new projects moving forward? How does that impact the ability to expand of what that partnership looks like?
So I think as a part of a partnership, you have to be open and willing to take on new opportunities and risk. And I think Dynamic has proven time and time again that as FedEx has ebbed and flowed from the different outcodes, FedEx Ground, FedEx Freight, FedEx Express to One FedEx, the responsiveness of Dynamic has been outstanding, right? I think when you think of those pillars and you put them together, that's where success happens and the businesses grow together. I think when you look at some of the expansion that you all are undertaking, there's some areas that we're essentially located near. It just creates some natural synergies for both parties to take advantage of some great opportunities.
I'll share it quickly. I think, with having transparency and communication early on, I mean, they birth adaptability. So the fact that we had those right away, it allows for adaptability in really most of the situations we've encountered together throughout the last, what did we say, 3 years now?
Yeah.
3 years.
It's been that long.
Yeah, time has flown. So yeah, I think you can't be adaptive unless you have the other cogs working together in unison.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of ends most of the questions that I have. Anything else that you guys want to share before we wrap up then?
Sure.
I'll just end with, just showing you appreciation for the partnership. I think, I've grown personally a lot in working with you and Charles and Ken and Owen, and I know that a lot of the team that's kind of hands-on in the front line and working with FedEx has learned and grown a lot from you guys, and, we just look forward to continuing the partnership, and I think, hopefully other clients and or vendors out here can learn from, what we've kind of established as the principles of a good relationship. Like, honestly, what we implemented to onboard and sustain the relationship with FedEx, we're implementing with our other clients because it works that well. So, I think that there's a lot to be said about some of those core principles in the start of a relationship where you can't look to the future unless you have the foundation built, right? Yeah.
We echo those sentiments, right? I mean, when you think about everyone that we've interacted and engaged with Dynamic, the Andrews and Jasons, the Ashleys, the Caseys, right? We've never had a bad experience, right? One of FedEx's mantras is to make every experience outstanding. You guys have truly meant that to us, right? To, again, go from being thrust into a new role to having to get a new vendor and managing through some of those growing pains, it has been a breath of fresh air. I mean, we've gone from not knowing each other to a partnership to feeling like family, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we talk about our kids, we talk about our families, and we celebrate the good news, we share in the bad news, all those different things, right? So again, to your point, right, when you think about, again, creating a corporate dynamic and a partnership, it is truly a partner and a family ship, and we appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for joining us today and kind of walking through that. It's great to hear, as you guys mentioned too, just the key aspects, those pillars that make a really strong partnership back and forth for both the vendor and for the client side of you, but not just, I mean, for ITAD vendors, really for most vendor relationships or client relationships too. So hopefully everybody joining today is able to really take away a lot from this podcast and just move forward with their relationships that they have with their vendors, whether those are current vendors or you're exploring new vendors or whatever it might be, can take little bits of this information and make those successful as well. So thank you both again for joining us today.
Yeah,
for having us.
absolutely.
Yeah. Hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.